If you hit me with a sword, that's going to be game over for me. What if fighting games worked the same way? When I decided I wanted to get into the genre, I felt overwhelmed by complexity. It seemed like there were so many things to keep in mind that I couldn't focus on any one of them to get my head around it. That's one of the reasons that games like Footsies appealed to me, a stripped down fighting game to practice the fundamentals. I think such games can be interesting beyond the beginner's perspective. They might reveal something about fighting game design in general. If a simple game like Footsies or Dive Kick is fun, is it the same fun as you'll find in Street Fighter or Guilty Gear? And if they're not fun, what are they missing from those more mainstream titles? I've recently come across a group of games that simplify the fighting game formula by removing the health bar. Every strike that connects is deadly. That means no combos, no different damage numbers for different attacks, and no balancing the roster with different amounts of health between characters. Interestingly, while art styles vary, many of them use a samurai setting and aesthetic. This could have something to do with inspiration from an early prominent one-hit fighting game from the late 90s, Bushido Blade. In that game, most clean hits would kill, although it was also possible to limit the opponent's movement by striking their limbs. Unlike the games I'm going to talk about today, Bushido Blade was 3D and released by a major publisher. The one-hit fighters I'm covering in this video are all 2D indie games made by small teams, sometimes just one person. First Cut has been available for free on itch since 2017. The developer is currently working on an upgraded version called First Cut Samurai Duel, which will eventually come to Steam. Thank you very much to someone connected to the game for giving me access to the beta version of Samurai Duel, which my footage is from. Keep in mind, it is not yet available to buy, and this is a beta build, so it might not be fully representative of the finished game. If you want to try the game before the finished version comes out, the free version on itch will give you a pretty good idea of what it's like. You have three stances: high, low, and middle. If your opponent tries to hit you with a high attack while you are in high stance, or a low attack when you're in low stance and so on, you automatically block it. But if they attack you with a different stance than the one you're in, you're dead if you don't dodge it. There is a bit more to it than that, but it has a strong essence of rock, paper, scissors with an added element of timing. My opponent is holding his sword high. For a degree of safety, I can hold my sword high too. But to hit him, I will need to lower it to another stance. If he guesses that that's what I'm going to do, I might be hit as soon as I lower my sword, no longer able to block his hit. On the other hand, if he doesn't see it coming, by lowering my sword and immediately attacking, I can win the round. This could be seen as reminiscent of mix-ups that arise in more traditional fighting games. Should I block high or low? First Cut is not the deepest, but maybe the purest implementation of this one-hit 2D concept. There is no roster of characters with different movesets. You are always playing the same character. The main single player mode functions similar to a beat 'em up, and there is a ring out mode which adds a bit of complexity and options to how you go about getting a win. One Strike has elements of the mix-up play of First Cut. Unlike that game, in One Strike you press a button to block. You can't just hold it to keep blocking. Pressing the button commits you to it for a short time, which I believe varies between characters, and you would need to hit the block button again on just the frame right after your block finishes to maintain its protection, which is not easy. If your opponent baits a block and knows how long it'll be until your character is vulnerable again, and knows how quick their own attacks come out, blocking at the wrong time can make you vulnerable. On the other hand, successfully blocking a hit will briefly stun the attacking player, so you can try to get a quick hit in yourself. Most characters have to press the attack button twice, once to get into attacking stance and again to unleash the attack. You can use this for mind games, double tapping to quickly attack, or going into attack stance to bait a block. The cast is quite diverse, with attacks that vary in range and speed. There's even a ninja character with a projectile, only one though, so don't mess with it. This creates a more complex footsies game than in First Cut, and matchup knowledge starts to matter. Unfortunately, the AI does not live up to that complexity in this game, and it becomes quite easy to cheese it once you find something that the AI doesn't know how to deal with. I went on a run of immediately winning round after round by picking the ninja character and throwing my shuriken as soon as possible. A human player could pick up on that after a couple of cheap wins, so I would recommend playing One Strike with a friend if you have any. Unfortunately, the game doesn't have an online mode. It does have an upcoming sequel available in early access now, now on Steam with a really exciting art style, more complex fighting, and online multiplayer. It's called Two Strikes. What's next? Third Strike? Sclash is another 2D one-hit fighter, but it feels very different to me, mainly because of its stamina system. You can take stamina off your opponent by baiting whiffed hits or parries from them, hitting them with a non-lethal punch, or parrying their strikes, which also recharges your own stamina. Stamina gradually recharges on its own, but if you run out, you will be extremely vulnerable, unable to parry for a short while. This adds depth. You can try to catch your opponent off guard, or you could try to force them to waste their stamina and get a free hit. It also adds a sense of urgency. It can be tempting to stand around waiting to react to a strike with a parry, but when you have a stamina advantage, you want to make the most of it, not wait around while your opponent's bar refills. I feel that Sclash's stamina system serves as a creative substitute for a health bar. In a way, this reminds me of the grid system in Under Night, a measurable and visible source of advantage which can go back and forth between opponents, independent of health. The result is that Sclash has the rock, paper, scissors and footsies of first cut and one strike, but it has an added tug of war which can add a bit more of a developing story to a fight. You can feel like you're losing and make a comeback, whereas in one strike and first cut there is less of a flow between different states of play. The game is still a work in progress, but it does include a pretty cool story mode and has online multiplayer if you can find someone to play with. Sclash shows that these games don't have to be bare bones to be interesting. It could be cool to see experiments with this kind of game, but with other features that add complexity. Maybe you could build on the ring out mode in first cut. Could you build a compelling sumo game around this? What would a one-hit game with crazy anime fighter aerial movement look like? What about motion inputs? The time that motion inputs take, or even the difficulty of executing them, can add nuance to the risk versus reward trade-offs in fighting games. How could that be applied in games like this? What would it be like if existing mainstream fighting games had a one-hit mode, where whoever does the first pixel of damage wins the round? I'm sure it would be an unbalanced mess, but it could be a fun experiment. I was surprised how different these games are, despite all being 2D samurai-based one-hit indie fighting games. They're not even the only ones. Ki, Resonance, and Slice, Dice and Rice fit this same description. I think they do make some aspects of fighting games accessible to an audience who might be overwhelmed by a more fully featured fighter. Are they a gateway to the genre for beginners though? To be honest, I don't really think so. Footsies, which is similarly pared down, works a bit better for this because it has explicitly educational modes that explain concepts in a way that applies to most fighting games. But even then, I think if you want to play a certain complicated fighting game, it's better to just play that game and use resources to figure it out, whether those are in-game, online, or through a friend. Where I think these one-hit fighters shine is for playing with someone who doesn't play fighting games and doesn't necessarily intend to. You can introduce the controls super quickly, matches are fast, and when one hit is all it takes, there is always a chance a noob can win, even against a much more experienced player, so nobody should feel totally hopeless.